So I guess as far as the early education, then that's what I wanted to kind of touch on.
Sure.
When the education system was kind of first started in America, did they have a Christian viewpoint as far as what would be taught, or?
They taught the Bible because they believed, you have to understand, we were a nation that was meant to be self-governing. Okay, so one of the speakers of the House in the 1850s, Robert Winthrop, who I believe was a descendant of John Winthrop, who, when Reagan talked about, we were a city on a shining hill, granted that statement came from the Bible, but that was a sermon that Winthrop wrote back in the early 1600s, talking about if we do all these things that God would bless us for, like he would originally with the Jews, if you do these things, I will bless you. If you do these things, I will curse you. And Israel chose to be cursed more than blessed most of the time. He brought those same things up and said, if we do these things, God would bless this nation. But his ancestor, Winthrop, said, look, he was talking about the Bible. He was on a Bible society. And he says, look, you've got a choice. You can be governed by one of two things. You're either governed by the bayonet or you're governed by the Bible. So in other words, either you need external forces to govern you or you govern yourself.
What point did that change, though? Like, at what point, was it the 60s, 70s? What point did the education system start turning to, I guess, a different direction?
Well, from what I've been gathering, and this has been, most of the stuff on my own, it sounds like it was about the 1920s where it started taking the hit. Because that's when they started going with the concept of taxation without representation. Everything we done was economically based. This had nothing to do with, with freedom of religion and morality. It was pretty much we broke off from England because of taxation without representation. When you read in the grievances Jefferson wrote, there were more things about how the king interfered with governments. There was more things about judges, for crying out loud. That's why in the Constitution, you've got a very small paragraph on what judges are allowed to do. I mean, they're the weakest branch, according to the Federalist Papers.
Now, and I guess it seems like, you said 1920s, but it seems like, and we're getting into the 20s here too, but I don't want to say another hit, but there is definitely a change in the education system, it seems like right now, or perhaps we just notice it more right now. I don't know what it is.
The biggest thing is you go back to the Supreme Court cases. The Everson case was the one that brought up the wall of separation of church and state, except they twisted it around. Instead of keeping the government out of the churches, they kept the church stuff out of the government. And most of the fights used to be about, having manger scenes, creches, if you will, on public property. And there was a judge in the New York Supreme Court, State Supreme Court, that put in his verdict. Everybody keeps bringing up separation in church and state. You would think it was written in the Constitution. It was never written in the Constitution. But in 62 is when they took, the most innocuous prayer out of school was gone. In 1963, they decided, well, the Bible is now gone. So then you started getting all these weird cases later. The Lemon Test, that's the one that the justices threw out in this current Supreme Court. That was the one that was talking about when you chop the arms off of a cross because of the war memorial. I think it was Bladenberg. That was the name of it, Bladenberg Cross. If you can chop the arms off, you can have that, but you can't have a cross. And our justices said, this Lemon Test has really been a problem because, you're allowed to do a religious activity as long as it's secular. So, when you can figure that one out, let me know.
And so you said there's some bills kind of coming down the pike right now. What do you see right now as far as what's coming out of Lansing?
Well, I'll tell you what the biggest problem is. I was talking to a friend about this earlier. I think the reason they want the Bible and Christianity out of school is pretty much a concept of forgiveness. And you got to think about that for a minute. when you take a look at what had happened with the slavery issue, and not all states were slaveholding, the northern states definitely were not. As a matter of fact, you only had 2 states that made them get rid of that thing out of the Declaration in the first place. You know, but it seems they keep ginning this thing up. And we're teaching Black History Month now in February. If we taught actual original history, you wouldn't have to worry about bringing black people into it because they've always been a part of it. It's just we don't know that. Lexington and Concord. And this is the other part they don't bring up either. You had a pastor that organized the army for Lexington, Jonas Clark. He says you're not going to fire the first volley. God will not honor an offensive war, which I disagree with that, but that was his thought. So the Brits fired first. 18 people hit the ground. One of the congregational members was black. His name was Prince Esterbrook. Anybody know that? Probably not. When they got to Concord, Pastor Emerson there, he had a church. And he said, by the way, since you fired on our brethren in Concord, we're now free to fire upon you. So they took out quite a few Brits. So now they're heading back to Boston to regroup. On their way, they met some other churches with other people fighting, which you get back to Bunker or Breed's Hill. It's been interchangeable for some reason. But the 2 people that were recognized for that incursion was Salem Poor and Peter Salem. And both those men were black. So
Yeah, it's weird how you don't hear about that. If like you said,
I was at a Wall Builders Pro-Family Legislative Conference, and the Hessians were going up against a Rhode Island regiment. They were black. They kicked their butts the first time. They kicked it the second time. Third time they came out, they kicked them again. The commander went to the chief officer he was under and says, please don't make me do it again because my men are going to kill me this time around. You don't hear about that.
So what's the solution then? I guess if people are trying to erase history and kind of trample on local school boards, local communities' thoughts, what's the solution that other people that might want to run for school board, what's the solution to them of how they kind of maintain their community and their school?
Solution is you got to educate yourself. I mean, that's what we got into. I mean, I loved history in high school, but I am now digging into it more now than I ever did. I start looking up all these things that people tell me, and I start going back in history and I start looking, and I got to admit, God has definitely guided me into all these things. I mean, I trust David Barton's group to a great degree.
What's David Barton's group?
Wall Builders out of Dallas, Texas.
And what do they do?
He has a museum down there. He has also been a legislature. He gets politically involved. He has actually written the Republican Party platform in 2016, and they retained it in 2020. And that's when it was a pro-family, pro-life document, not the document it is today. I would say the biggest thing is I think Donald Trump had the right idea, and I'm going to give him credit for it. The Department of Education has got to come out of D.C. It's got to be gone.
What's your ideal view? Is the state kind of helping local schools, or is that?
I would really like to bring it back to local, and let us start determining what we feel that our students should need. I mean, the United States was supposed to be a laboratory of ideas. We've been trying this stuff with social emotional learning. We've been trying all these new age thoughts in the school, and I mean, yeah, they're new age.
Is there a place, though, for the state to maybe help connect the dots as far as schools go, so they're not completely on their own with resources, or how do you view that?
Given the current makeup of the Board of the State Board of Education. It's all political. It should never be by political party.
How do you feel that you could maintain cohesion though in like all these separate schools, as far as like teaching one history?
Right now, I don't have a good solution. The only thing I could think of is we have a thing called the Michigan Board Association of School Boards. And they are the most liberal group right now out there. I mean, they're pushing all the transgender stuff. They're pushing these school breakfast and lunches. I mean, we never had that stuff.
Why is that though? Because school boards are so local, and they send a representative to the Association of School Boards, I believe. Why is that not reflected with what they're pushing?
Maybe that
are they being influenced by something else? I mean, that just seems odd, doesn't it?
I don't know what influences them. I mean, if it's the teachers' unions, I mean, that seems to be a lot of it. But then again, most of this stuff probably comes from the colleges, because the colleges have been so woke. This is what they train our teachers with, and really, they don't know what to do with it either. I mean, when you've been brought up so long, slavery is a good issue of that. John Jay, our first Supreme Court justice, it finally dawned on him, we shouldn't be enslaving people. It wasn't that he was out to hurt people. He wasn't all that. It's just when you grow up with the norm that slavery is the norm, and all of a sudden you one day figure out, what we're doing to these people is wrong. You have that wake-up moment.
Do you feel, when you talk about teachers' unions, do you feel it's like the local teachers' union that's pushing a lot of this, or do you feel it's more of a national agenda of sorts?
I would say it's more the national agenda and actually the state agenda, too, because the infiltration has gone that far. Now,
so the more local, the better across the board is what you're trying to...
Because Arkansas, for instance, they're actually going to put the Bible back in school. They're working on it. Their superintendents in the process, their state superintendent is in the process of putting that back in. And they are, and again, it's where you get the history books from. And right now I am trying to work on getting a good source for that.
And so what's your future plans for the school board that you currently sit on? What are you kind of hoping to achieve before the end of your term?
I guess I would like to get the community involved and start looking at the stuff we're teaching these kids. I mean, this is one of the, I think this will probably just about give you everything you need to know. They were talking about the Declaration of Independence, and this is straight out of one of the history books we got there. If a government disregards these rights, Jefferson explained, it loses the right to govern. The people then have the right to abolish that government by force if necessary. They can form a new government that will protect their rights. When Jefferson spoke of the people, however, he meant only free white men. Women and the enslaved were left out of the Declaration. Well, it's left out of the Declaration if you don't read his rough draft.
Right. There's a lot more to it.
I mean, this is what they teach. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it today because I've been in prayer about this whole thing. And, we're supposed to be culturally sensitive to everybody else. You can't wear an American flag on the 5th of May because that's Cinco de Mayo and that marginalizes the Mexicans. You can't wear a Confederate flag shirt because that's offensive to the black Americans. That sentence I just read you, isn't that kind of culturally insensitive to people with lighter colored skin?
I think there's something that everyone could be offended by if they wanted to, but yeah.
I mean, there was this black AME pastor, Richard Allen, and the best I can do is paraphrase. But after after the Revolutionary War, he was a former slave. He opened up the first black AME church. And one of his messages to his black congregation was, we have to learn to forgive these people. Some of them are coming around to the right thing. Like I told you, John Jay started having a shift in in a mental attitude. In Massachusetts, there was never any distinction. I mean, black and white were all treated the same.
Where can people, I guess, to wrap things up, where can people go to learn more about what you're saying?
I will give them the Wall Builders address. It's www.wallbuilders.com. And I would start with the American Heritage series, because that was the wake-up call for my wife and I. Building on the American Heritage series will enlighten you more. He's come out with 2 books right now. And these books, the references they go to are actually the original. These references are like about 1800, close to the event. So you have the information. Most of the modern books now, everybody quotes their buddies, so you're going to start finding nothing goes much around 1940. That's about the minimum.
Well, thank you, Gary, for being here. We appreciate it, and hopefully people check out that website and learn more and definitely research more for their history.
Thank you.
Hey there, everyone. Just wanted to remind you to stay in the loop. If you're watching us on Facebook and Rumble, be sure you hit that follow button. If you're following us on YouTube, be sure you subscribe and follow so you can see every episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen-size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.